Good afternoon on what I'm now describing as business as unusual. Just when we think we're on one path, things change. So we've hastily put together the webinar in response to Saturday's announcements. And like many of you, I dare say you were waiting constantly from 4 o'clock onwards, just checking every once in a while about the announcement, which miraculously seemed to just actually end by the time for Strictly Come Dancing, so everybody could sort of just move on. Anyway, I want to go through today mainly about questions. We've got questions coming in, and there's questions going up to London as we speak. I will do an update on the government. Next slide, Rob. The update on the government guidance, the business support, and that's evolving as well. Some lobby issues, which we've got to update, and then more open to the questions and answers. So, Rob, if you can move on to government guidelines. Now, there's always variations in some of these things, but you'd might have already picked up, and it was clear that the Prime Minister said that any visitors that are already on holiday at 1 o'clock, or sorry, 1 minute past midnight on Thursday morning can complete their holiday. Obviously, there will be devil in the detail there of what happens if somebody turns up on a Wednesday. But also, obviously, mainly for more hotels and service, but can be self-catering as well, is you might decide that you cannot operate at that sort of level if most of your visitors have already left and everybody else has cancelled, and you've got very few. Then it is perfectly legitimately to apologise, do a small refund for the days missing, and send people on their way tomorrow afternoon. And I know that many hotels will be closing tomorrow, as it's just not viable to carry on with only a very small number of guests over the next few days. But technically and legally, as we understand, visitors UK and overseas can complete their holidays. I have to say that we were promised the government guidance yesterday, but I think due to the parliamentary system, I don't think we'll get the detailed guidance until tomorrow afternoon after it's been voted through in Parliament. I think parliamentary procedures have come in, and that the government daren't issue guidance before something's been approved in law in Parliament. So some of this may well change, and also open up to anybody going forward until the next webinar. Please feel free to send a question in to either industry@visitcornwall.com or even directly to me at mal@visitcornwall.com if it's urgent. So where are we? Well, the first thing is there's even confusion this morning because botanical gardens are allowed to stay open, but gardens aren't. The National Trust have decided to keep their gardens open, and we're waiting for clarity there. Although it does appear that in some of the earlier guidance it said paid attractions should close. So I'm afraid a bit of opaqueness in that area alone. But it is a real challenge. What we do know, though, is the furlough scheme will be based on the August principle, which is 80% pay, does allow for part-time and staged furloughing, but the employer does have to pick up the national insurance and pension contribution. We've also had some questions in from our task force today, very good questions, of what calculation you should use, because some employees might have had an average wage that's gone down because of furlough and because of maybe part-time stage working, and that's gone off to London. At the moment, you should use the average, even though that could be lower. The other big thing that we're pushing hard on in London via the Tourism Alliance is we know which businesses are likely to be legally closed down, which does include bars, restaurants, paid attractions, gyms, all sorts of places. They will be closed by law. But for many of our members, you are de facto closed because the customers cannot come. So one of the things we're pushing hard for, and I'll get that out to you as soon as possible, is that if you have chosen to close because you had no choice with no customers, then you should still qualify for all the business support arrangements, particularly the grants that we are expecting to be announced and were indicated by the Chancellor yesterday. And the big ask we've got, I'll come on to this in lobbying, is we do need to know pretty soon, i.e. certainly in the next 2 or 3 weeks max, and long, at least a week or more before, what happens about coming out of lockdown. It appears at the moment we'll go back into a tier system. So will that mean tier 1 for Cornwall? But also where will the other tiers be on affecting business for Christmas? Because obviously if people are in tier 3, they shouldn't be moving. And tier 2, if they all stay the same, shouldn't be sharing households in self-catering, but allowed in hotels as long as they don't sit together. So we're really pushing hard that we need clarification now on the support and the detail, but very quickly afterwards, we need to know the plan going forward. But as I said, we'll get stuff out on B2B Twitter and out on Thursday, particularly in the industry newsletter, when we get the guidance, and we'll get that out to you as soon as possible. I know there's some questions about visitors already on holiday. We'll pick that up during the questions because there are a variety of issues. The other big thing been on to London about is that coming back to the visitors on holiday is obviously that people who need to work, essential workers, NHS workers, but also other people. And a query today from a film company that's got permission from DCMS to carry on. Where can they stay? And a very clear change between lockdown 1 and lockdown 2 is that our advice is that you actually get somebody to declare, even on a piece of paper or in an email, that they have checked the guidance and that they are okay to travel, and if they do, and stay with you. That's mainly for business related hotels, i.e. you ask the question, it's not your responsibility to check if it's true or not, because there's too many options open now. Somebody could legitimately be down to support construction or manufacturing or fishing or loads of other sectors that will still be working. And it's not up to you to decide whether that's the case. So our advice is to cover your rear end, get them to declare that they've read the guidance and that they are clear that they qualify. That's one of the exemptions that are allowed to stay in the area. And then if they're lying, they have the full force of the law because you've done your due diligence in asking them to comply. Moving on, Rob, to the next slide. Business support, we've already mentioned the furlough that we've got reasonable issues on. The business support this time is going to be different from what we hear. It's going to be run on a local basis, and we are working with Cornwall Council and the Local Enterprise Partnership and feeding in with FSB and the Growth Hub and all others to put together over the next week or so what the criteria and the application process would be. You will all be aware that last time there was a lot of reaction, understandably, from people about second homeowners getting big grants. So it is very likely that this will be handled locally. It is very likely that it will be an application process so that businesses that normally close in November anyway, unfortunately won't qualify for obvious reasons, but equally second homeowners won't. But we also want to pick up on those people on furnished holiday lettings in the past who have missed out are included. So it's got its pluses and its minuses. If it was going to be a national scheme, then we could all moan like hell and complain and say how bad it is. This one's going to be more local, and we will be using a task force and maybe even extra webinar to actually try to hone a more targeted scheme this time that suits Cornwall. The other big ask that we're looking at is from people like the Growth Hub and the business support agencies is around cash flow advice and assistance, and maybe even cash flow loans. Something we got worried about is particularly if Christmas and New Year is depleted and there's another lockdown, say in January, which we can't discount at the moment, is that many businesses will find cash very tight this year, and they need help in that, maybe help in mediating between landlords or mediating between people you owe money to, as next year is going to look quite good, hopefully, and the long-term and medium-term prospects are great. So the big message pushing out at the moment is we don't want any good, viable businesses to go bust over the winter because of lack of cash. That comes into also the business health survey. We'll probably work with the LEP on a business health survey to find out the cash positions of many businesses and their position in terms of their survival challenges between now and next April. And on that note, we will be pushing very hard for tourism to open up at Easter and stay open. As we know, we operated safely from July, August and September, 2 million customers and no sign of any transmission. So we don't really want to wait to July again next summer. We want to open up earlier. Now that's all emerging because we're still waiting for the guidance from the government and the allocation of funds, but we will be consulting on that. Last slide, well, second to last slide, Rob. Lobbying representation, I covered this bit. This is a slide literally copied from last time, just to say that because of lockdown 2, we won't be stopping our lobbying for action. So that's about a fair representation on the outbreak board, and that's what we've got. I'm on the engagement board, and things so far, touch wood, we're still the lowest place in the country, even though it's rising. Things like the lessons, this whole thing around testing, particularly in the run up to reopening and stuff like that. And as I said, we've covered the rest. The big national one that probably has got to be added to that is clear guidance with at least a week to 10 days notice of reopening, of what the reopening will be after lockdown. So that's just a quick summation, is to say, even though we'll be dealing with lots of short-term queries from lockdown 2, we won't be backing off chasing the ongoing issues. Oh, I'm sorry. I almost feel guilty about coughing these days. Can we move on to questions and answers, Rob?
Bear with me a second. I'll just get the questions loaded.
Yep.
There we go. We've got a couple of questions that have come through just now, and also there were some that came through on email. So I'm just checking I've got everything, and then
I'll go with the first one while you carry on with that one, which is I have a let where the guest. Sorry.
All sorted. So yeah. So first one is I have a let where the guests have just arrived for a 1-month stay. Are they allowed to stay that length of time, or is there a possibility they will incur the wrath of locals if they don't go home?
I don't know who your locals are. The legal position as we know it today is that they can stay at the end of their holiday. Obviously, a month is a long one. But what's got to be made clear to the guests is that from Thursday morning, they must absolutely minimize their journeys outside the home or outside the let. So they can go for essential shopping only. They can go for exercise for as long as they want, but in the local area is the guidance. They shouldn't be traveling and visiting different parts of Cornwall. If that's acceptable to them, then legally they can stay. It depends also from your side about whether you want to terminate the stay on the grounds of Lock 2. I suppose my thoughts are, rather than advice, is if the let is reasonably distanced from other people, then I don't see the problem. But if it was in an area with locals literally next door, it might be prudent for your relationship with neighbours to discuss with the guests to go home earlier than 1 month. There might be at the weekend or whatever, but it's that judgment call on when it comes to the neighbours. But legally they can, but they should stick to the same rules as the rest of us from Thursday. But you've got to make that judgment call with what the neighbours are, how wrathy they would be. And I know that's not a word.
It is down in the lizard. Okay, next one. Will it be okay for cleaners to go into houses whilst they're empty and do deep cleans, or for us to go round and check all the houses, etc. during lockdown, or is this deemed as non-essential?
I would say actually on this lockdown that is possible, provided you do all the COVID safe things. Construction is still going ahead, manufacturing is still going ahead, providing this is not incurring people mixing. That's the main issue, and obviously leave the 72 hours, might as well be on the safe side. then the cleaners to go in to do deep clean and other things I don't see as an issue, as long as people are not mixing. So if it's two cleaners from different households, they shouldn't be doing it. If it's one cleaner to go in and they're not mixing with any other people, then I can see that's akin to other work that is allowed to go on. So it's the importance about, are these people mixing with other people? Because that's what this lockdown is all about. So I hope that's clear. If it's a cleaner going in, or you're going in working on your own, or somebody in your own household to check out houses, that's okay, but not for two workers from different households to be in close proximity.
Okay, next one. We understand guests can finish their holidays up to Saturday, but do we know what they will be allowed to do? Can they drive, say, to the Lizard from Helston to go for a walk? We know visitor attractions will be off limits. Thanks for your tireless efforts.
Well, I'm sure Rob would like to see lots of people down on the Lizard. That's where he lives. The technical answer is yes. I mean, the guidance is to not travel to try to keep travel down to a minimum. Now, that to me is, using it reasonably is, 15, 20 minutes, not huge journeys. So technically that, but again, keep your distance, your hands, the face, and all of that in there. And obviously you won't be able to go into a cafe or restaurant, they'll all be closed and the pubs will be closed. But for exercise you are. And actually, I think the Dominic Cummings situation is that they're not specifying that you can't go too far. But for instance, if you're in Helston, I think it'd be unreasonable to be going down to Land's End or up on the north coast, but within a sort of zone, I think that would be okay. Visitor attractions are off limits. That we're still wondering about the issue that we know the National Trust are saying they're going to stay open, including their gardens, because they seem to be one of the exemptions. Although I'm still waiting to see that in black and white, but I'm sure they're not wrong. As I said, the real challenge is they've seemed to have said that botanical gardens can stay open, but other ones can't. And apparently a botanical garden is one with labels on the plants. So very grey. But if you've got a guest, you say, if you go out and do one bit of exercise, it can be as long as you want, so they can walk a fair old lock and then go immediately home, that is permissible within the guidance.
Okay, next one. Do people already staying with us have to leave by midnight on Wednesday?
Two answers to this is, if your business has to shut because it's unviable to operate from Thursday, the answer would be yes. So I know some of the hotels are telling guests that they have to go by tomorrow afternoon, and they're obviously doing a pro rata refund on that. If you're able to operate, and that's particularly for self-catering, and again, that there aren't got to get the wrath of the neighbours and the relationships are reasonable, then that is fine. They can stay. The Prime Minister was very clear on that they can complete their holidays.
Next one. I'm an activities provider leading educational walks outside. I read the new guidelines as no longer allowing businesses to facilitate groups, social distancing, even if they work outside. Is this how you read it? It
is how I read it, unfortunately. And it's a bit the same about certain sports outside and all the rest of it. So I'm afraid that does apply that, de facto wise, or actually legally, you will be told to close.
Next one's a little bit longer, this one. Having studied the government website, there are areas pertaining to self-catering accommodation that are not clear. I've also checked on the Cornwall Council and PASC website, both of which have not updated their information to cover the latest government restrictions. Could I ask the following questions? A, I have an inquiry requesting accommodation in one of my self-catering cottages from 9th to 14th of November for guests specifically carrying out construction works for Highways England. Am I allowed to accept this booking?
The answer is yes, but I would make sure you get a clear email from the person that when the guidance comes out tomorrow, and the reason why we've got this problem with the guidance is I don't think the government want to annoy Parliament anymore by issuing guidance before it's been passed in law. In there, it will have exemptions for people to travel for work. So my view would be to go back to them when it comes out and say, can you please confirm that you've read the government guidelines on the exemptions, and can you confirm that you are definitely covered by those exemptions, and then hold on to that for your evidence. My understanding is construction workers will be allowed to, but it would be, would this be, because the other thing on this one, just thinking it through, is if this is one person in self-catering, that's fine. If they're from multiple households, I might have to get that checked. If it's 4 guys or 4 people, I should say, in a gang, does that qualify that they can stay together? So if it's an individual, that's quite clear. If it's the other, if it's more than one, drop me an email and I'll get the answer to that, but it probably won't be till tomorrow or even Thursday.
And then question B, if I have guests who have arrived on Saturday, 31st of October, prior to the latest lockdown being announced, are they allowed to complete their stay departing on 14th of November?
Yes, they are. If you want to carry on operating the business, they are allowed to stay, but they have to stick to the local, well, the national rules now, which is to stay in the property unless you have to go out, and to only go out for exercise exercise, but there's an indeterminate period of when that exercise can take place. It could be for an hour, it could be for 10 hours.
And then question C, a guest who arrived on 31st of October prior to the latest lockdown being announced has booked for 2 weeks to cover a period between houses. They have no alternative accommodation available until 13th of November. What am I supposed to do about their booking?
They are allowed to stay. It is covered by one of the things, because people are still allowed to move house and relocate. So that one is yes, they can, providing obviously again it's one household that is staying together.
Okay, that's it from that one. Next one, I have a holiday let business advertised through your website. I would like to put a question to you with reference to the impending lockdown. We have guests booked for 6 weeks starting in mid-November. They are digital nomads, which appears to be a thing at the moment. They have rented out their house and are working from home wherever that is in the country as they travel. As we will be their home during their stay and they are working, will this fit in with lockdown rules?
It's certainly one of these ones where it's probably challenging, but actually on first take of that, again, if they are one household, and I can't stress that too much, they've been together and they are working there, it is probably acceptable. But again, I would wait till we get the guidance tomorrow and go back and get them to confirm that they qualify, and then that does cover you, because if they are working down here or they are working, it does qualify as a temporary home, and that is permissible. It's a grey area, but I would get them to confirm that they qualify.
Next one, having cancelled a couple of bookings, we are thinking of taking the opportunity to come down to do maintenance and fit a kitchen. Could this be classed as work/essential?
Now that's a more, sorry, I should be laughing. If you consider yourself to be a construction worker and you're one household and you're coming down to do that, then that might be permissible. I would, again, I'd like to take that one away when I see the guidance and come back. So again, if you can email me on mal@visitcornwall.com, I'll get that one checked out. Could be a grey area, but it could well be permissible. It would depend, again, if you had to leave the property, you had everything you needed to do it in the property and can abide by the rules. That might well be possible this time where it wasn't last time.
That one was David Hurst, not by email. This one, Marco.
Okay.
Next one. If guests were due to arrive yesterday for a 5-night stay, Monday the 2nd to Saturday the 7th of November, and they decided to cancel yesterday, were they entitled to 100% refund or just refunds in our standard terms and conditions?
Due to arrive for 5 days, Monday. It's straddling it, really, to be honest. I mean, obviously from Thursday they would be entitled to 100% refund under the CMA rules. My belief is they were probably entitled to 100% refund because part of the stay is there, and the CMA have been quite strong on that. So I regret to say they probably are entitled, and if you pushed it, they could probably get that ruling, as some of their holiday is within the closure area. Although, hang on a minute, sorry, I'm wrong. My brain's not working strong. So they were due to be here on Monday. They could have completed the stay. I'm sorry, I just realised that they were straddling it. They've decided to cancel. You could have accommodated them. So it's just your standard T's and C's. That's a voluntary cancellation. It's not a mandatory cancellation. On that one.
Right. Next one, Malcolm, did you just say try to reopen for Easter, not leave it as long as July? I was writing notes and may have misheard.
Now, I suppose that's one that, you know, we just want the government thinking ahead now. I mean, first of all, don't worry. I think we will be open in December. It's whether there's another lockdown next year. So I'll make myself a bit clearer. First of all, this lockdown will take through to the 2nd of December. Might be a bit longer, who knows? Then we'll have Christmas. It's whether we have another lockdown in the spring. A big thing is to say to the government, you know, as little lockdowns as possible. And certainly we want to be fully running at Easter. So I'm not saying there'll be a lockdown all the way through, but we really want to say that, you know, we don't want to miss out on Easter or anything next year. It should be well in their plans that we should be operating in March, you know, fully and open as normal. So sorry if I confused you. That was my miscommunication.
And then the last one that I've got, which is a question and a statement, I think. Can we lobby for clearer guidance on the distance allowed to travel for exercise? As last time we had a number of day visitors coming to Cornwall, there was a clear ease last time where they stated unlimited. The current statement isn't clear and open to interpretation.
It is fudge, and it's not good Cornish fudge either. I think it'll be very clear that it should be the minimum distance required to exercise. So I think day visitors coming into Cornwall, and that's literally coming from Lifton to somewhere in the Tamar Valley, should be absolutely no. The problem will be is how the police it. But my thing is that, you know, you're talking 15, 20 minutes, not more than that. We'll see what comes out, but that's the thing. We'll work with Cornwall Council on clear messaging. Is, you know, forget about Bishop Stortford or wherever you went. We consider this to be a relatively short journey if you take one at all, if you can exercise near where you are. And that's what we'll work on Cornwall Council to make a clear interpretation from a Cornwall perspective. The government will probably leave it fudged, I'm afraid, as they did last time. But I think we need to beef that up and not have the thing that you can travel as far as you want, which is the government statement. I think we need to make it clear we are talking about that 15, 20 minutes travel zone as the strong interpretation of the guidance. And I did pick up something, either reading it or on a podcast or a webinar earlier, and they were saying it shouldn't be a long journey. Again, the challenge will be this time is that because there'll be a lot more traffic on the roads with people going to pick up children, childcare, construction workers, other workers going to work. It's going to be a lot harder to spot people who are just deciding to flaunt the regulations and travel around. But that's just a personal observation. Yeah, I don't know how the police can ever do this, but I think what we need to do is clear statements out to people in the hope that most people will take a clearer statement this time rather than the statement you can travel as far as you want.
And I think that's all the questions, Malcolm. Oh, no, sorry. One of the innumerable, I can't even say that word, sorry. One of the many numbers of situation updates suggested that hotel guests should scan the QR code every day. Is there any suggestion that self-catering guests should be doing the same?
The answer is yes, they should be doing the same. Ironically, it's whether people will actually do it the same as the issue. So you should encourage people. Don't ask me why. I was given the advice that it's because the data is cleared every night, which doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever, because you obviously need the data. But the advice is they should scan every day. Obviously, you can't enforce that, but you should ask people that one and suggest. Like I said last time, if some people say, I'm not using the QR code, just say that's your choice. we're only making a request, as there are some people that get quite agitated and even sort of semi-aggressive when that one's pushed.
And that's all the questions. That's no more on email as far as I can see, and no more in the chat.
Okay. There's one more thing I'd like to say, is that we will, because of the need to provide accommodation, not just for essential workers and key workers, but other people coming down to work. As I said, you could have a sort of quantity surveyor having to come down for a building site, is we will have a section on the website which will list all the accommodation that could be available, but it would at the end be subject to big warnings for the individuals that they must comply to the government regulations and exemptions. We'll be sending out more details of that on this Thursday's newsletter. Nothing against, personally, you know, it all seem to be Airbnb bashing, but what we don't want, because of the new regulations, it will make it very, very easy for OTAs and Airbnb, and there are excellent Airbnb people, just to carry on. I don't think they'll close their platforms down, which will give the wrong impression. So we want to communicate with the council and employers that if you do have to have people down, go to the Visit Cornwall.com website to find the accommodation that is available for workers who are legally allowed to travel around, to try to avoid people coming down who shouldn't be here because they have no legitimate reason. Now it's a bit fudge, but I don't think you'll find Airbnb closing the booking platforms down this time, as there is a legitimate reason that they could actually be accommodation for key workers. Again, we will probably do another webinar, probably be next Tuesday now, because I think it's a lot of toing and throwing. I've got 2 more questions to go back up the line. We'll be having a meeting with the head of DCMS on tourism on Thursday. The Tourism Alliance is meeting with the Tourism Minister almost speak, and I'm sure lots of other things coming out, which will get out on the B2B Twitter and the newsletter, but we'll probably run another one next week to pick up on all the anomalies that I'm sure will still exist.
Just one more question as well, Malcolm. We have a booking from a UK citizen who is relocating from France. She's booked from 28th November to 1st of March, whilst looking for a new house, having sold hers in France. What is her position? Hope this isn't too late. It's not too late.
On the relocation one, again, that is permissible. So the answer would be yes, that is permissible. But again, I think, again, cover your rear end by making a very clear statement that she's read the government guidance and that she has determined that she's okay. You can only believe what somebody says. It's up to them to perjure themselves. So if the police did come round, you've done all your duties and responsibilities. But that one is permissible. Or shall I say we? That's as far as my French is going this afternoon. So thanks for that, and thanks, and we will keep plugging away, and if there are individual queries, then keep them coming in. We might not be able to answer them, but then we can go and get try to get the right answer from the various people, and then we can share it with everybody, which saves everybody having to go chasing their own answers. So I hope it's been useful, and I'll see you again next week. And please stay close to the B2B Twitter and the newsletter when it comes in on Thursday. And wishing you very well. And as one of our members noticed on the Corona Task Force this morning, every time we get a lockdown, the sunshine comes out. So we're hoping that we don't end up with sunshine all November and then horrible weather in December, but who knows. So good afternoon and stay safe.